They said Earth was a soft target, a water world, a paradise. They'd conquered empires in the heat of 1,000 stars. They didn't know what it meant to fight the frost. A silver Xilian scout ship, Valcor 7, descended between pale, jagged mountains. The air was blue-black, the kind of cold that devours color. Metal creaked as the hull settled, groaning under the strain of a world that had built its bones from ice and wind. Inside the ship, Captain Krell scanned readouts. Sensors flashed warnings in every language the ship knew. The temperature report was impossible. Numbers so low even the computer refused to process them. Krell's breath fogged on the inside of his visor, crystallizing instantly. He blinked, uneasy in a way he tried to hide from his crew. He'd conquered jungles, fought on planets with clouds of acid and rivers of molten glass. But this was different. The silence outside was thick, a presence of its own. Krell spoke, his words cold and flat. Temperature sensors are malfunctioning. Engage secondary heaters. Prepare to land. Oru, his second in command, adjusted the controls with shaking hands. Even layered in advanced exofiber, the cold bit deep. Atmosphere analysis incomplete. Hull temperature dropping fast. Proceed. This world surrenders today. The ship touched down. Frost spun around the landing struts as snow, whipped by wind, slapped the hull in sheets. The ice was relentless, heavy enough to make the hydraulics groan. The sky above was a steel dome pressed tight over the emptiness. The doors hissed, then stuck. The seals shivered and trembled as temperatures plunged. They expected a welcoming jungle. Instead, they landed on a graveyard in white. Within moments, the ramp's outer seal froze solid. Hydraulic pistons cracked with a sound like snapping bones, a gunshot echoing in the night. Krell pressed a control. The ship shuddered, but nothing moved. He tried again. Nothing. Oru's gloved hand hovered over the manual release. Captain, the egress system is frozen. The manual override is frozen to the casing. Override it, Krell replied, but the command was hollow. Even to him. Oru pounded the control. The panel cracked with a brittle pop. He winced, drawing breath through his fangs, already feeling the numbness spreading through his fingers. They came with plasma rifles and gravity harnesses, trained to fight under two suns. But the first enemy they met was water, turned to stone. Ice crawled silently over every surface. Alien technology choked by the simplest molecule in the universe. Inside the hull, screens dimmed. The heating array, built for eternal summers and gentle moons, protested with a dying whine. Lights flickered, circuits pulsed, but each effort seemed weaker than the last. The crew muttered in their harsh tongue, voices muffled as translators failed. The batteries built for warmth died without ceremony in the cold. A junior tech coughed, a thin rattle clouding the air. Even that vapor froze before it hit the deck. Captain, the recycler's frozen. Waste vapor is solid. Krell closed his eyes. It began as inconvenience, then became suffocation. Metal, water, circuits. All slowed. Outside, the world pressed in, old and indifferent. There was no welcome, only the sound of wind and the distant, endless rattle of ice against the hull. Krell tried to rally his crew. Emergency power! Override the heaters. Everything to secondary systems. Oru fumbled with the backup generator, but it refused to start. He struck it. Nothing. No hum, no spark. Just a dull, frozen silence. The main bay's metal gantries glittered with frost. The command crew stood clustered, drifting towards each other as instinct demanded warmth. Armor, advertised as absolute protection, felt thin as paper against the deepening cold. They wondered how long they had before the cold won. The Xilian conquest of Earth didn't begin with a bang. It started with a freeze. Dawn never really arrived. Instead, there was a slow turning of the black sky to a kind of gray, a half-light that brought no warmth. The Xilian ship was sealed in white, every joint and seam gripped by frost, a tomb within a tomb. Inside, power dwindled. The crew moved slower, their movements stiff, eyes glazed and haunted. No alarms sounded as the first shape approached. On this cold morning, silence ruled. It was a human, at least that's what the sensors claimed. Krell stared through the frost-patterned viewport, trying to make sense of what he saw. The figure trudged beside a battered machine, an ancient snowmobile, sled fitted with wide treads and a burbling, defiant diesel engine. It growled against the hush, spitting clouds of gray exhaust that hung in the frozen air. The human wore layer upon layer of gear, patchwork of furs, reflective orange panels, a mask rimed in ice, eyes hidden behind thick goggles. They moved with slow, deliberate confidence, as if nothing in this world could harm them. Krell watched, mind straining to interpret primitive actions. This world's creatures still roam the surface? His voice was nearly lost in the cold-soaked air. Oru wiped frost from a sensor. Movement detected. Life form, human. Only one signature. No weapons visible. Primitive transport, primitive. That word comforted Krell, though doubt gnawed at the edge of his mind. He could see the way this creature handled the cold, not as an enemy, but as a familiar, a companion. The human leaned down, checked something on the snowmobile's engine, gloves working tiny controls with practiced ease. A thermos, battered and black, steamed in their hands, steam that vanished instantly as it left the cup. The human didn't even shiver. Instead, they lifted the visor to sip, then turned their head as if they could sense the ship even with the sensors dead, the hull silent. Inside Valcor 7, the temperature dropped another half degree. Techs huddled over heating units, coaxing life from batteries meant for gentler climates. One muttered a curse as his exosuit's display flickered and died. Even the most advanced armor had not anticipated this endless cold. Suddenly, a new sound. Not the wind. A thunk, gentle, almost polite, against the hull. Everyone turned. Sensors had failed hours ago, but movement still carried through thin metal. A second thunk. Rhythmic, deliberate. Krell's orders were icy. Arm yourselves. Prepare for confrontation. In the hush, each step seemed too loud. The aliens pressed close to the main hatch, plasma rifles ready. Their breath clouded and drifted downward, slow, heavy. They could hear each other's hearts, quickening not with excitement, but with an animal fear. Outside, the human worked without rush. With a short-handled tool, a simple hammer, handle swaddled in tape, they knocked away ice from the ship's landing gear. Small movements, precise as surgery, the engine of their machine never faltered. They squatted, hunched over something scrap metal gray. Without fanfare, the human poured a viscous brown liquid from a battered can into the snowmobile's tank. A cold weather blend. Local knowledge. The aliens waited for lasers, for explosions. They expected something unmistakably threatening. Instead, the human simply existed, surviving in the open with tools and instincts the Zillions couldn't name. Krell whispered, "Why don't they hide? Why aren't they afraid?" He spoke the word afraid with unfamiliar bitterness. Oru adjusted his suit heater again. Should we open fire? But Krell hesitated, for the human had started something new, a small fire. Tinder and matches as if mocking their high technology. A plume of blue smoke twisted up, curling through a windbreak made of snow blocks, built in seconds by practiced hands. It went even further. The human unpacked a battered, soot-stained kettle and set it on the flames. Water, clear from a tin flask, steamed. Steam that was whipped away in the wind, but enough to warm gloved hands held briefly above the flames. The scene was ancient, the simplest act of life, performed under the gaze of the most advanced beings in the galaxy. Inside, bitterness and confusion warred in the Zillions' minds. Oru's translator buzzed, then failed. Instead, he used the guttural sound of his own people. Survival protocol. We never imagined this, Krell said nothing. He stared, imagining the fragility of flesh in such cold, but the human disproved every assumption. The snowmobile rumble was a heartbeat in the white. The fire was ancient and fundamental. From the corner of his eye, Krell saw something else. On the horizon, more figures, far away but purposeful. They wore colors the Zillions couldn't assign meaning to. Muted camo, orange, and cold blue. Maybe a dozen gliding over the snow. No vehicles, just skis, sleds. Moving slow but sure like predators not in any hurry. Still, there was no attack. No threats. Just method. The first humans scraped their plate clean, doused the fire, stood, and with one quick motion, hauled the snowmobile around, gunning the engine to life. The group on the horizon paused, watching, then continued. There was a patience in these creatures, a comfort in the cold. None of them rushed. No desperation. Just life, stretching out in an uninterrupted routine. Inside the ship, lights dimmed further. Heaters whined, then failed. The crew's hands moved slower, muscles stiff with the deep, creeping cold. Outside, the humans only seemed to grow stronger, faces flushed, movements unhurried. Krell realized the humans weren't impressed by the invaders. They weren't even interested. The Zillions had always thought of themselves as the predators. But out here, in the deep cold, they began to wonder which species truly ruled this world. Time blurred inside Valcor 7. Minutes, hours, perhaps even a day, it couldn't be counted. Frost veiled the ship's displays in a dull silver. The emergency lights flickered, casting wavering shadows against the walls. Each breath from the crew added another layer to the ice, slowly creeping over every surface. Captain Krell sat hunched in the command chair, his limbs stiff, bones aching with unnatural cold. His armor should have been enough. It was rated for extremes no Zillion had ever encountered before. But this was something else, an elemental siege, silent and absolute. The heaters cycled in broken gasps, running up against laws of nature their builders never had to consider. Around him, the bridge was a graveyard of dying technology. The air recyclers shivered and seized. Hydraulic lines cracked open, fluids leaking until they froze into strange, eerie sculptures of colorless ice. Every movement from the crew was slowed, not just by cold, but by fear settling deeper as hours passed. A thick silence grew. Words came rasping, spoken through numb lips. "The oxygen mix is dropping again," Oru said, voice hoarse. His nails, dark claws, had turned a strange purple-black under the skin. He clutched them against his chest, desperate to warm them. "Primary processors are shutting down. We can't restart them." Krell stared through the port, though it was clouded with frost. The outside world was a haze of swirling snow and shifting light. He remembered the human. The bright body warmth visible only through a thin sliver of exposed neck. Untouchable. Unbeatable. A tech officer began to cry quietly beside a dead monitor. Frost had welded their helmet to the console. The tears turned to ice as soon as they left their skin. "We have to get out," said another voice, distant and small. "We have to try the override. I can't feel my tail. I can't—" "The manual lever broke," Oru answered. It snapped, like dried bone. "We can't open the main ramp. Even if we did, our suits, their armor was useless. Every joint had seized. Weakening seals let in drafts of sub-zero wind, biting at raw skin. What had seemed advanced now felt fragile, laughable. From the floor came another choking cough. Their youngest crew member, barely of age, curled tightly in the shadows, hugging their knees. Frost rhymed their eyelashes. Every whimper was slow and ragged, accompanied by tiny clouds of breath that hung in the air, spectral, lost. "Salvage the shuttle?" someone asked. Oru shook his head, the motion sluggish, hopeless. "Starboard bay is frozen over. We'd freeze before we reach it. Power cells are dead. There's nothing left to restart. Above them, ice split with an explosive crack, a section of outer hull snapping under its own brittle tension. Metal groaned. Support beams flexed. Each sound drew a wince, bodies shrinking toward the patch of warmth left by a silent heater. No one cursed anymore. The anger had faded, replaced by a gnawing dread. They were not at war. They were prey, caught by an indifferent planet. Krell forced himself to stand. His joints resisted. Fluid barely moved under the armor. It was similar to death, he realized. A long, slow freezing of purpose. The second-in-command faltered at the console, hands moving as if underwater. "Scan for life. Anything." "Pick up that signal," Krell said, though their equipment made only a high, empty squeal in reply. Even the sensors had given up, Oru managed. No movement in the last cycle. All local activity faded back into the storm. A pause. Then Krell spat out, voice raw. "They aren't attacking. Why? Why don't they finish us?" No one answered. They all knew the truth. The enemy outside needed no weapon. Cold was enough. Hunger arrived next. Rations that should have lasted a week were frozen solid, impossible to eat. Hydration packs became useless blocks. The gnaw of emptiness inside matched the bite of the cold outside. Those who still could gnawed on ice chips or tried chewing the synthetic packs, desperate for moisture, for anything. In his mind, Krell saw again the humans, thriving, busy, warm in the cold, using simple machines and laughter as their armor. He remembered the fire, the easy way the humans sipped at a steaming cup as his crew nursed frozen burns from touching energized coolant. Their advanced alloy was nothing compared to a thermos and a pair of boots lined with wool. The captain made a final decision. "We need to try the EVA," he ordered, lips blue, vision shrinking to a tunnel. "Find tools, anything. One last effort. The engines. If we can free the main intakes, maybe we can jumpstart power. Oru, you and the others, move." It didn't sound like courage. It sounded like resignation. Oru and two others strapped themselves into harnesses heavy with dead batteries and approached the hatch, fumbling at the manual controls. Their gloves split, rubber cracking, exposing bare skin to the metal. The first touch sent a jolt through Oru's arm, a bite so cold it felt like fire. He screamed, jerking back, glove frozen to the surface. No one moved to help. As another hour passed, the temperature dropped again. Every system failed. Some simply sat where they were, unwilling or unable to stand. Others drifted in and out of semi-consciousness, dreaming of warmth, dreaming of green jungles and water and sunlight. But there was no rescue. Above, the ice thickened. Outside, the wind howled, unconcerned. Deep within the half-frozen minds of the Zillions, a single idea took root. Earth was not the paradise they thought. It was a graveyard crafted by weather, and the humans simply learned to live among ghosts. Krell, stripped of all hope, sat still and watched ice creep over his hand. He closed his eyes. No glory. No final battle, just cold. The storm cleared just enough to reveal motion. From the frosted windows of Valcor 7, the remaining Zillions saw shapes in the endless white, backlit by the ice moon. Human shapes, moving with purpose. Not hurried, not desperate. Just moving with intent, visible through gaps in the swirling snow. They came in twos and threes, weaving their way through jagged drifts. No shields, no armor. They carried axes, shovels, old hunting rifles. Some dragged sleds loaded with wood and fuel. Others pulled covered bundles of tools and black-gutted engines. From inside, the aliens watched these shapes grow closer, never running, never shouting, just advancing, step by step. Krell pressed his frozen hand to the viewport, stomach clenched, expectation twisted by something new. Fear. The first human squad reached the hull. Instead of fire, they brought the cold with them. One pulled a thick yellow tarp from the sled, coated in a slick of frost and heavy with what looked like bricks. The bricks thudded into place in a circle around the ship. The humans stacked them, a wall of dense black material. Another checked the vents as if inspecting a neighbor's chimney. Then, one by one, the humans uncoiled a strand of wire and propped it against the hull, pressing it tight to an air intake. They worked in total, focused silence. Inside, the Zillions watched. Every system warning flashed. The last of the heat faded. No one knew what the humans were doing. A sudden, deafening bang echoed from beneath the hull. Not an explosion, an impact. The ship rocked gently. Ice shattered and fell in slabs from the landing struts, exposing pale metal to the sub-zero air. Now there were voices outside, laughter muffled behind thick scarves, the quick bark of instructions, all as relaxed as any Sunday morning. Another blow, this time a blunt log swung by two figures smashed through one of the lower hatches. Freezing wind howled inside, filling the bay with powder so fine it could slip into any gap, any vent. The alien scrambled, firing a plasma bolt through the door, but it fizzled, powerless, lost in the mist. The cold snuffed it as if it were a candle. More impacts, more wind. Shovels scraped against steel. Chunks of dry ice were stuffed into vents and seams until the metal shrieked from within. Human solutions. Primitive, messy, deadly. They used physics, not fire. Leverage, not lasers. One human raised a two-way radio and spoke, voice flat, bored. "Air's getting in, hull temps dropping, ready to breach." Another, her face pink with cold, eyes narrow and patient, fitted a canister to a vent. Her gloved hand spun the nozzle. A hiss, a plume of white vapor, CO2 colder than the air itself. It poured into the ship's systems. Circuits shrieked, brittle boards snapped, wires burst open, and the smell of burning insulation drifted through the cabin. Oru tried to retreat, crawling toward the back, but slipped and fell. His breath rasped, thick with defeat. Krell tried to shout an order, but his voice shattered in the frigid air. The main hatch gave out with one groaning, metallic shriek. It buckled, then flopped open, spilling a tongue of snow into the corridor. The humans waited outside, not in a rush. Two stepped forward, axes resting on their shoulders, heads tilted in the wind. Their faces were red with windburn, but their eyes were quiet, almost bored. The first human stepped into the bay and looked around, headlamp gleaming on the frost-slick walls. He pressed a button on his battered radio. "Hull's open. Smells like burnt wires. Caution. They're still armed." Behind him, another human grinned, setting a heavy boot on the ship's deck, testing the metal for strength. "Don't reckon they'll bother us much now," he said. The voice was calm, amused, as if this were merely a chore, not war. Krell's eyes darted to the plasma rifle in his hand. He raised it, willing his numbed finger to squeeze the trigger. Nothing. The cell was dead, frozen solid. The lead human walked forward, rifle slung loose, an old bolt action. He leaned close to Krell, close enough for the Zillion to see the condensation freeze on the man's beard. The human's voice was quiet, each word as sharp and clear as the cold. "This is our winter," he said. "You picked the wrong season." Krell tried to move. His limbs were unresponsive. The other Zillions collapsed to the deck, barely conscious. Another human ducked through the hatch and knelt by the nearest alien, examining frostbite, curious, almost clinical. He shook his head. Not going to make it. Too cold for him. The humans move systematically now, scanning, cataloging, disabling weapons, pulling out batteries, poking at the alien controls with a mechanic's interest. They stripped every last ounce of tech that still worked, salvaging insulated wiring for their own gear. They did not celebrate. They did not gloat. For them, this was work, precise, necessary, routine. One human, young, not more than 20, paused in the snow and frowned at the frozen faces inside. "What do you think they wanted here?" she asked. The man with the beard shrugged. "Same as anyone, I guess. Lucky for us, they don't know how to survive winter." They dragged the last zillions, shivering and silent, out into the pale morning. No anger, no hatred, just a kind of cold honesty, the final mercy given to those who never understood the rules of this place. The ship sat, seized by ice, doors wrenched open to the sky. The humans stacked their salvaged gear onto sleds, lashed it down, and turned back toward the tree line. Their shapes faded slowly into the blinding white, as unhurried as ever. Behind them, the silence returned. Wind scraped the hull. The cold reclaimed its territory. Earth had defended itself not with weapons, but with patience and cold. And that was something no invader could prepare for. The scrape of sleds faded into the silence. The humans were gone now, vanishing into the maze of broken pines and shadowed valleys, their forms swallowed by distance and snow. Behind them, the Zillion ship lingered, battered and useless, half buried by drifting powder. The last motor stuttered, then died, quiet as breath. No light remained except for the pale echo of the sun glancing off a world that never warmed. Inside the hull, nothing moved. The ghosts of the invaders, shriveled, frost-bitten, silenced, remained as pale reminders of colder laws. In the weeks that followed, slow change came. Wind filled the broken hatches with white silence. Ice claimed every chamber. The elements finished what humanity began. Circuits popped, crystallized, and split. Panels warped, half-eaten by frostbite. The hull buckled, then bent as the polar winter pressed those thin, clever alloys beyond their limits. Scavengers came, not the desperate, but the prepared. Human teams, hard-eyed, laughing, wrapped in canvas and wool. They arrived with saws and cutting torches, dragging sleds and laying down tracks with engines that coughed and spat, but never surrendered to the cold. Children of the North, they treated the alien ship for what it was. A source of scrap, a story for future telling, a caution to anyone who might listen. Word spread. Far from the ice in warm cities, fireside tales grew, a ship that crashed. Strange bones found in the frost. Stories about frost-bitten figures with blue-black skin, wide haunted eyes, and hands warped by a winter they could never escape. Survivors traded fragments. Bits of crystal, broken weapons, shiny discs of alien metal, each with a story sharper than the wind they rode in on. In orbit, nothing stirred. The Zillion Armada sent a signal, a call for help, a demand for recovery, a threat. Nothing answered but the wind and the hiss of snow against failed sensors. Satellites caught only photographs, empty snowfields, twisted chrome, the shadows of human teams moving efficiently and slowly, faces veiled by scarves and goggles, revealing nothing. No resistance, no hope. No Zillion reinforcements would land or try again. In time, the galaxy noticed. Remote probes picked up the old distress beacon from the downed ship, a weak, frozen signal lost in the void. Others came sniffing for weakness, hungry for a soft world, but the records from Valcor 7 told a different story. Begin file, Valcor 7, last transmission, atmosphere uninhabitable. Tech failed at 50°C. Native population thriving. Severity rating, hostile environment exceeds all biotech limits. Survivors perished by exposure. Abandon all attempts. Classify as forbidden. The warning was simple. The lesson was colder. They had expected resistance and found indifference. They had brought the best of their science and were undone by boots, jackets, habit, and laughter in a blizzard. The galaxy wrote Earth off the maps. No merchant bothered with winter routes. No pirate set a course for the frozen poles. The world's name came up only in hushed voices. A myth behind every cautionary tale. At the edge of a dying transmitter. Long after the last echo faded, one line repeated endlessly into empty space. Do not approach. Lethal cold. Native species resilient. Conquest not advised. If the galaxy cared to look closer, they'd see the truth. Winter had always been humanity's oldest enemy, and now humanity was no longer alone in their mastery of it. Every year, the cold returned, generations marched into it, and the world spun through new seasons. The ship, now a crumpled skeleton, froze deeper with every passing month. But in every wind-scoured village, by every crackling stove, the story was told and retold. The invaders came in a time of snow, seeking easy victory. They left nothing behind but a lesson the stars would remember. The last sound over the horizon was the soft, steady crunch of boots on ice, a presence always moving forward, never stopping, never running from the chill. Earth had been tested. Earth had proved itself. And somewhere, in that perfect frozen quiet, something as old as the wind turned its face up to the endless, unbroken sky and smiled.